Rabbits belong to the order Lagomorpha, a lineage that diverged from rodent-like ancestors roughly 40 to 55 million years ago, during the early to middle Eocene epoch. Unlike rodents, lagomorphs possess two pairs of upper incisors, one behind the other, a distinctive dental hallmark that defines the group. The earliest lagomorphs were small, swift herbivores whose survival depended on acute senses, rapid reproduction, and exceptional agility. Fossil evidence from North America, notably the genus Paleolagus, dating to around 34 million years ago, reveals creatures that closely resembled modern hares. These early forms laid the evolutionary foundation for the rabbits and hares that would eventually spread across the globe. Over millions of years, lagomorphs diversified throughout Eurasia, Africa, and the Americas, developing variations in size, fur density, and behavior that allowed them to thrive in grasslands, forests, tundra, and deserts alike. Among these descendants, the genus Oryctolagus, which includes the modern European rabbit, Oryctolagus cuniculus, emerged during the mid to late Pleistocene epoch, native to the Iberian Peninsula and southern France. This species became the progenitor of all domesticated rabbits. Its name, derived from the Greek oryctos, dug up, and lagos, hare, evokes its defining habit of constructing elaborate underground warrens. Unlike hares, which give birth to furred, open-eyed young above ground, rabbits produce blind, furless kids in protected burrows, an evolutionary strategy that significantly increased offspring survival in predator-rich landscapes. The rabbit's evolutionary success rests not on strength or size, but on adaptability, sociability, and prolific reproduction. A single female can bear several litters per year, ensuring the species' persistence despite heavy predation. This high reproductive rate, coupled with selective grazing, made rabbits key ecological engineers. They helped maintain the balance of grassland ecosystems and sustained a wide food web that included foxes, raptors, and humans. In this sense, rabbits embody an evolutionary paradox, fragile as individuals, yet enduring as a species, perpetually renewing their numbers through cycles of loss and regeneration. Human interaction with rabbits long predates domestication. Upper Paleolithic hunters in the Mediterranean region likely trapped and consumed wild rabbits, taking advantage of their abundance and accessibility. Archaeological sites in Spain and southern France reveal gut marks on rabbit bones, evidence of systematic hunting and butchery. Beyond nourishment, early humans probably used rabbit pelts for warmth and shelter. Though such relationships remained opportunistic rather than controlled, it was not until the early Middle Ages that people began deliberately managing and breeding rabbits, setting in motion one of the last true domestication events in human history. This between the 5th and 10th centuries CE, when monks in southern France realized that rabbits bred easily in confinement and provided a convenient source of meat, especially valuable during Lent, when the consumption of most other meats was prohibited by the Church. The ease of breeding and the animal's gentle temperament made them ideal for small-scale husbandry. Monastic enclosures, known as cunicularia, enabled selective breeding for docility, size, and fur quality. Over time, these domesticated lines spread from monastic farms to noble estates and rural holdings throughout Europe, establishing rabbits as both a dietary staple and a familiar presence in agrarian life. Rabbit domestication diverged sharply from that of dogs, cattle, or horses. They were not tamed for labor or companionship, but cultivated primarily for meat, fur, and reproductive efficiency. Yet, as selective breeding intensified, new traits emerged: gentleness, curiosity, and responsiveness to human care that transformed them into more than mere livestock. By the Renaissance, rabbits were kept in gardens and courtyards, as much for pleasure as for sustenance. Naturalists began documenting their variety, and by the 18th and 19th centuries, as animal breeding evolved into both science and hobby, rabbit husbandry reached new sophistication. Breeders produced strikingly different forms, from the massive Flemish giant to the tiny Polish and Dutch breeds, reflecting the full range of human influence on the species. Long before medieval domestication, however, the Romans had already recognized the rabbit's economic and culinary potential. They established leperaria, walled enclosures where rabbits were raised for meat and fur, and transported the species throughout their empire, introducing it to Britain and other territories. This deliberate translocation, coupled with the rabbit's extraordinary fecundity, laid the groundwork for its global distribution. When European settlers later carried rabbits to the Americas, Australia, and New Zealand, they unleashed one of the most consequential biological invasions in recorded history. In Australia, for example, a mere 24 rabbits, released in 1859, multiplied into hundreds of millions within decades, devastating vegetation and outcompeting native wildlife. The rabbit's adaptability, once an evolutionary triumph, became a symbol of ecological imbalance and a lesson in the unforeseen consequences of human intervention. As centuries passed, the rabbit's role in human society expanded beyond utility. During the Victorian era, rabbits became fashionable pets, admired for their softness, intelligence, and quiet charm. Breeders refined coats of Angora, Rex, and satin textures, and rabbit shows became popular social events. The animal's place shifted further. During the and rapid breeding made rabbits ideal laboratory subjects. They played pivotal roles in the development of vaccines, serological testing, and early research on immunology and toxicology. Yet these scientific contributions also ignited enduring ethical debates about the treatment of animals in research. Debates that continue to shape bioethics and animal welfare today. Genetic studies in the 21st century have confirmed the close continuity between modern domestic rabbits and their wild counterparts in southwestern Europe. This finding underscores that domestication was not an abrupt genetic transformation, but a continuum of coexistence under human influence. The rabbit remains a bridge between nature and culture, its biology shaped by millennia of environmental pressure and centuries of selective breeding, from the warrens of prehistoric Iberia to suburban hutches and scientific laboratories. The rabbit's journey mirrors humanity's own complex relationship with the natural world. It is a story of adaptation and interdependence, of survival achieved not through dominance, but through quiet resilience. An unassuming herbivore that began as prey has become a global presence, woven into the ecological, cultural, and emotional fabric of human life. The rabbit endures as both symbol and companion, a testament to how evolution and civilization, entwined over millions of years, can shape one another with subtle and lasting grace. Long before domestication reshaped their destiny, rabbits occupied a distinctive position in the mythologies, economies, and imaginations of ancient civilizations. Their elusiveness and prolific fertility made them both symbols of mystery and sources of sustenance, weaving them into the fabric of human belief and survival across continents. While the archaeological record of rabbit domestication begins in medieval Europe, the animal's cultural resonance stretches far deeper, echoing in ancient art, ritual, and subsistence patterns. From the Americas to the Mediterranean and East Asia, in prehistoric Europe, the rabbit's presence is visible in the earliest human settlements along the Mediterranean basin. Caves in Spain and southern France, dating to the Upper Paleolithic, reveal layers of rabbit bonds that testify to intensive hunting and seasonal trapping. To early hunter-gatherers, the rabbit represented both abundance and transience, an easily caught source of food that appeared in great numbers and vanished just as swiftly. This duality shaped early symbolic associations. The rabbit as a creature of renewal, tied to the rhythms of nature and fertility. In time, these associations found artistic expression. Paleolithic carvings and cave paintings, though rare in depicting small animals, occasionally include stylized forms of hares and rabbits, societies developed agriculture and settled life, the rabbit's role evolved. In the Mediterranean world, particularly around the Iberian Peninsula, the natural homeland of the European rabbit, ancient peoples integrated the animal into their economy and mythos. The Phoenicians, who established colonies in Iberia, are thought to have been so struck by the abundance of wild rabbits that they referred to the land as Ishapanim, land of the Hyraxes, mistaking the unfamiliar creatures for the rock hyraxes of their Levantine homeland. The Romans later adopted this description in Latin as Hispania, the root of the modern name Spain. Thus, the very name of a nation carries within it the shadow of the rabbit, enshrined in linguistic history. The Romans were among the first to treat rabbits not only as game, but as livestock. They built lepuraria, enclosed warrens where rabbits were bred for their meat and fur. Unlike the later medieval hutches, these early enclosures were often semi-natural environments, sections of land surrounded by walls, allowing controlled populations to reproduce while still foraging freely. Roman gourmets prized the meat of young rabbits, known as lorises, which were considered a delicacy. The historian Pliny the Elder, in his Natural History, records the Roman taste for these animals and the spread of rabbit farming throughout the empire. Roman soldiers and settlers introduced rabbits to Britain, North Africa, and parts of Central Europe, unintentionally setting the stage for their naturalization far beyond their native range. In addition to their dietary and economic roles, rabbits and hares occupied complex symbolic positions within ancient mythology. To the Greeks, the hare, and by extension the rabbit, which they did not yet clearly distinguish, represented desire and vitality. The goddess Aphrodite was often depicted with hares, and the gift of a hare between lovers symbolized affection and fertility. Aristotle, writing in the 4th century BCE, marveled at the animal's fecundity, believing it capable of conceiving while already pregnant, a myth that reinforced its association with fertility and eroticism. These beliefs traveled into Roman culture, where the rabbit became linked to Venus, the Roman counterpart of Aphrodite, and featured in domestic art and statuary as an emblem of love, renewal, and abundance. Beyond the Mediterranean, rabbits and their relatives held spiritual significance among indigenous peoples of the Americas, where the cottontail and jackrabbit species were well known. In Mesoamerican cosmology, particularly among the Aztec and Maya, the rabbit was a lunar creature, symbolizing the cycles of birth, death, and regeneration. The Aztecs believed that the moon bore the image of a rabbit, a belief still echoed today in the rabbit in the moon motif, visible in many cultures. The Aztec goddess Mayahuel, patroness of fertility and nourishment, was often accompanied by 400 divine rabbits, the Senson Totocten, embodiments of drunkenness and revelry. This imagery celebrated the rabbit as a creature of exuberant life force and abundance, linking it intimately to the human experience of pleasure and renewal. In ancient China, too, the rabbit was woven into the fabric of celestial myth. The jade rabbit, companion to the moon goddess Chang'e, was believed to dwell upon the lunar surface, pounding the elixir of immortality with a mortar and pestle. This myth, dating back over 2,000 years, reflected the same global association of rabbits with fertility, renewal, and the lunar cycles. The animal's soft, elusive nature and nocturnal activity linked it naturally to the moon, a universal symbol of time's passage and the rhythm of life. Across civilizations, from the Mediterranean to Mesoamerica and East Asia, the rabbit emerged as a cosmic intermediary between life and death, light and shadow, sustenance and spirit. While rabbits were rarely used directly in warfare, they played subtle roles in the logistics and economies that sustained ancient militaries. Their fur and leather provided light materials for clothing and padding. In some regions, rabbit pelts were treated as minor commodities along routes connecting Europe and North Africa. More importantly, rabbit hunting and trapping contributed to the sustenance of armies on campaign. Roman legions, for instance, relied on portable traps to supplement their diets with small game when supply lines were stretched. In this sense, the rabbit was part of the living infrastructure of empire, humble yet indispensable. The rabbit's place in ancient trade networks is also notable. Pelts and furs were among the earliest traded animal products, lightweight and easily transported. In Mediterranean markets, they circulated alongside other small animal furs, such as those of the marten and squirrel. The soft, insulating properties of rabbit fur made it prized for lining garments in colder regions of the Roman and later Byzantine worlds. Even where the animal was not native, its products moved through trade routes, extending its cultural presence far beyond its ecological range. The symbolic and practical roles of rabbits intertwined in daily life. In rural Mediterranean and Celtic regions, rabbits and hares were hunted and sometimes ritually buried. Their remains found in votive contexts, suggesting offerings tied to fertility or seasonal renewal. Celtic art of the Iron Age occasionally features stylized hares, possibly as symbols of spring and regeneration. The rabbit's cyclical breeding patterns aligned naturally with agricultural rhythms, reinforcing its association with the renewal of the earth. In this way, it became not only a resource, but also a marker of seasonal change, a biological clock within the rural imagination. Across these ancient cultures, the rabbit served as a quiet but persistent thread, linking the material and than the mythic. It fed soldiers and peasants, adorned art and language, and appeared in the sky as a celestial companion to gods and goddesses. Though small and fragile, it carried vast symbolic weight, representing fertility, renewal, cleverness, and the continuity of life. When the Middle Ages arrived and the process of domestication began in earnest, the rabbit was already deeply embedded in the human psyche, a creature both real and emblematic, both food and symbol. By the time monastic breeders in medieval France enclosed their first cunicularia, they were not merely domesticating an animal for sustenance. They were giving tangible form to a relationship that stretched back thousands of years. The rabbit of myth, moonlight, and ritual became the rabbit of hearth and hutch, still carrying within its gentle form the echoes of ancient belief, its story in the civilizations of antiquity, spanning continents, faiths, and empires, reveals the enduring power of small creatures to shape the spiritual and practical landscapes of human life. The domestication of rabbits in medieval Europe initiated not only a biological transformation, but also an economic and cultural one, paving the way for industries, artisanal trades, and recreational practices centered around these small yet versatile creatures. Unlike cattle, horses, or pigs, rabbits offered a unique combination of high reproductive rates, manageable size, and multifunctional utility, which made them ideal candidates for both subsistence and commerce. From the earliest monastery warrens to modern exhibition breeding, the evolution of rabbit-based industries illuminates the deep entanglement of human ingenuity and animal domestication. In the cloistered gardens and enclosures of southern France during the early Middle Ages, rabbits were carefully bred for meat, fur, and pelts. Monastic communities refined breeding techniques, selecting for traits such as rapid growth, docility, and coat color. These early cunicularia were not mere pens, but carefully managed ecosystems. Grasses and herbs were cultivated to supplement the animal's natural diet, and warrens were rotated to prevent overgrazing. The monastic approach reflects an understanding of animal husbandry that prefigured later scientific breeding practices. By the 12th century, rabbits had spread beyond monastic walls into the estates of European nobility, where they were cultivated both for consumption and as a sign of wealth. Nobles prized delicacies such as young rabbits or lorises, whose tender meat was served at banquets, while fur was fashioned into linings, gloves, and ornamental garments. The economic potential of rabbits expanded as urban markets grew in late medieval Europe. Rabbits became an accessible source of protein for city dwellers, particularly in areas where hunting was restricted, or meat from larger livestock was prohibitively expensive. especially profitable, allowing even small-scale farmers to maintain sustainable herds for consumption, sale, and pelts. The industrial and artisanal uses of rabbits extended beyond meat and fur. Rabbit leather, or collada, was employed in fine bookbinding, gloves, and footwear, prized for its suppleness and durability. In addition, rabbit manure proved highly valuable as an organic fertilizer in intensively cultivated gardens, reflecting the early integration of rabbits into agricultural sustainability. Their behavior as burrowing herbivores also contributed to soil aeration when warrens were constructed in controlled conditions. In essence, rabbits were both a product and a functional participant in the management of the environment, a small-scale ecosystem engineer integrated into human-designed landscapes. Beyond practical uses, rabbits increasingly became objects of leisure and spectacle. By the 17th and 18th centuries, selective breeding for aesthetic traits such as coat color, pattern, and fur texture gave rise to the first true fancy rabbits. Nobles and early naturalists maintained these animals as curiosities and showpieces, a trend that spread to wider urban populations in Europe. The practice of exhibition breeding eventually evolved into organized competitions and clubs in the 19th century, particularly in Britain, which became the epicenter of rabbit fancy. Standards were formalized, distinct breeds were recognized, and judging criteria for conformation, fur quality, and color were established. Rabbits transitioned from mere utilitarian livestock to subjects of scientific interest, aesthetic admiration, and competitive display. The rise of modern rabbit-related sports and competitions illustrates the animal's continued integration into human recreation. One notable example is rabbit jumping, or kaninap, which originated in Scandinavia and the Netherlands and has since spread worldwide. In this sport, rabbits are trained to clear obstacles of varying height and complexity, a demonstration of agility, intelligence, and the bond between animal and handler. This practice highlights the continuity of human-rabbit interaction from practical husbandry to leisure activity, emphasizing care, training, and observation of natural behaviors. Similarly, rabbit shows and breed competitions serve as cultural touchstones, fostering community, knowledge sharing, and preservation of genetic diversity. In North America, the domesticated rabbit industry developed slightly differently. Colonists imported European breeds in the 18th century, initially for sustenance and fur. But the 19th century saw the emergence of exhibition societies and selective breeding for aesthetics. Rabbit meat was marketed in urban centers as an affordable protein source, while furriers and textile industries promoted specialized pelts provided a platform for breeders to exchange knowledge, develop standards, and cultivate an appreciation for the rabbit beyond its utilitarian value. The commercial potential of rabbits was further amplified during periods of scarcity. During wartime and famine, rabbits were prized for their rapid reproductive rates and small space requirements, allowing families to supplement diets without large investments of land or resources. Governments in some countries even promoted rabbit raising programs to ensure food security. For example, during World War I and II, backyard rabbit breeding was encouraged across Europe as part of civil defense and sustenance strategies. The rabbit's small scale, high yield, and low maintenance made it an ideal candidate for both urban and rural populations, reinforcing its role as a versatile resource. Scientific interest in rabbits also burgeoned during this period. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, rabbits became central to biomedical research, contributing to breakthroughs in immunology, genetics, and toxicology. The New Zealand White, now a standard laboratory breed, was specifically selected for docility, health, and reproductive reliability. Beyond the laboratory, this intersection of utility, aesthetics, and science reflects the broader societal integration of rabbits. Animals that could sustain, amuse, and inform human communities simultaneously. The emergence of rabbit-based industries, therefore, is not merely a narrative of commerce or leisure. It is a testament to the adaptability of humans and rabbits alike. From monastic warrens to urban markets, from furriers to exhibition halls, rabbits have traversed the continuum between survival and culture. Their story demonstrates the ways in which humans have recognized, enhanced, and celebrated the innate qualities of an animal that, in the wild, was small, vulnerable, and fast reproducing. The domesticated rabbit became a mirror of human ingenuity, reflecting economic foresight, aesthetic sensibility, and social organization. As the 20th century progressed, rabbits' economic, recreational, and scientific significance continued to expand. Pet ownership rose dramatically, fueled by urbanization, changing social norms, and increased appreciation for small companion animals. Rabbit clubs, breed registries, and competitive events formalized standards and promoted public engagement. Simultaneously, the commercial fur industry continued to capitalize on rabbit pelts, while rabbit meat remained a staple in regional diets across Europe, Asia, and North America. This dual trajectory, utility and leisure, underscores the rabbit's unique position among domesticated animals, small enough to be manageable, yet productive enough to sustain complex human enterprises. The rise of rabbit-based industries and sports, therefore, is both a historical and cultural phenomenon. Rabbits moved from wild prey to domesticated resource, from practical livestock to objects of aesthetic admiration and scientific inquiry. Their reproductive prowess, adaptability, and gentle temperament enabled humans to integrate them into multifaceted roles, shaping economies, leisure, and culture. In this process, humans also learn to appreciate and influence the natural behaviors of an animal that, despite its apparent simplicity, proved remarkably versatile, resilient, and enduring. The legacy of these early industries and sports continues today. In rabbit fancier societies, laboratory research, and the ubiquitous presence of rabbits in households worldwide. Rabbits, though small and seemingly fragile, have played a surprisingly significant role in the history of agriculture and human labor, demonstrating adaptability and utility that extend far beyond their symbolic or recreational functions. From early subsistence farming to pre-industrial labor systems, rabbits have contributed to both food security and the management of agricultural ecosystems, often in ways overlooked in the narratives of larger livestock. Their integration into farming practices reflects an intimate understanding of their biology, reproductive patterns, and dietary preferences, which allowed humans to harness these animals as highly efficient micro-agricultural partners. The agricultural revolution, beginning around 10,000 years ago, marked a transformation in human interaction with domesticated species. And while rabbits were not initially a primary focus, their eventual domestication complemented cereal cultivation, horticulture, and livestock management. By the Middle Ages, European farmers had recognized the rabbit's ability to convert modest amounts of forage into protein-rich meat and nutrient-dense manure. Enclosed warrens became common on both monastic and secular estates, functioning as controlled microfarms where rabbits could graze on forage crops, crop residues, and deliberately planted greens. The manure produced by these animals enriched soils, providing a natural fertilizer that improved yields without the need for large-scale plowing or livestock turnover. Rabbits were particularly valuable in small-scale and intensive agricultural systems where land was limited, unlike cattle or sheep, which required extensive pastures. Rabbits could thrive in confined spaces, including raised pens and sheltered burrows. Their altricial young, capable of rapid growth and high reproductive output, made them ideal for sustaining households and small communities. Families could rely on continued continuous production of meat without the extended gestation periods or large-scale feed demands of larger livestock, effectively integrating rabbits into household-level subsistence strategies. This dynamic reinforced their role not only as food producers, but also as agents of agricultural resilience, capable of buffering households against poor harvests, famine, or economic instability. In addition to meat production, rabbits played a multifaceted role in the management of agricultural landscapes. Burrowing behavior, while controlled in enclosed warrens, contributed to soil aeration and nutrient cycling, particularly in orchards and garden plots. In some regions, rabbits were rotated through fallow fields to consume weeds and invasive plants, effectively functioning as living garden assistants. Their selective grazing also allowed farmers to manage vegetation in ways that complemented crop growth, highlighting a symbiotic relationship between domesticated rabbits and agricultural productivity. The Industrial Revolution brought both challenges and new opportunities for rabbit-based labor and industry as urban populations expanded and rural to urban migration increased. Small-scale rabbit husbandry became a practical solution to the growing demand for protein within limited urban spaces. Rabbits were raised in backyard enclosures, often on city peripheries or in urban gardens, providing a direct link between rural agricultural knowledge and emerging industrial society. Beyond food production, their pelts were increasingly utilized in textile industries, while manure continued to serve as an organic fertilizer for early market gardens and nurseries. Draft work and transportation, though not roles typically associated with rabbits, were indirectly supported by their contribution to farm efficiency. By providing concentrated protein and manure, rabbits helped sustain larger livestock and smallholders, indirectly enhancing the capacity of human labor in plowing, carriage transport, and crop management. This overlooked utility underscores the rabbit's status as a micro-labor animal. A species' impact on agriculture was subtle, but cumulatively significant. Throughout these periods, scientific observation and experimentation with rabbits began to influence agricultural practices. Farmers and breeders noted not only reproductive cycles and feeding habits, but also disease management, enclosure design, and breeding for size or fur quality. These practical studies, often shared through guilds, fairs, and monastic writings, laid the groundwork for later scientific approaches to husbandry and animal welfare. Rabbits thus became both participants and subjects in the systematic improvement of agricultural productivity, bridging empirical knowledge and applied practice. In certain regions, rabbits also supported horticultural innovation. For example, in vineyard regions of southern Europe, controlled rabbit grazing was employed to manage undergrowth without harming vine stocks, providing natural fertilization while reducing labor costs. Similarly, in early market gardening in France and England, rabbit manure was collected and applied to vegetable plots, allowing intensive cultivation on small parcels of land. This integration of rabbits into multi-tiered agricultural systems illustrates their versatility. They were simultaneously food producers, soil improvers, and ecological assistants. Moreover, rabbits' adaptability made them particularly suited for experimentation in integrated farming systems, which prefigured modern permaculture concepts. Their small-scale, controlled reproductive output and compatibility with other livestock allowed humans to test the interrelations between species, soil management, and crop rotation. Even in pre-industrial societies, rabbits were valued not only for their direct outputs, but for their contribution to systemic agricultural resilience, a role that modern agroecologists would recognize as pioneering. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the formalization of rabbit breeding for agricultural purposes extended into specialized industries. Rabbits were bred for rapid growth and meat quality in rural districts of France, Belgium, and England, forming the foundation of small commercial enterprises. Their high fecundity allowed farmers to maintain continuous production cycles, which could be scaled to supply urban markets, military provisioning, or regional trade. Rabbits thus transitioned from a supplementary household animal to an integral component of early commercial agriculture. In parallel, rabbit husbandry influenced social structures in rural communities. The management of warrens and enclosures required specialized knowledge, creating roles for warren keepers, breeders, and traders. These roles, often hereditary or guild-based, highlight how rabbits contributed not only to material production, but to the organization of labor and the formation of local economies. Women, in particular, frequently managed small-scale rabbitry within household gardens, integrating animal husbandry with domestic and agricultural responsibilities, a reflection of gendered labor dynamics in pre-industrial societies. Even in contemporary agriculture, rabbits maintain relevance in specific contexts. small-scale meat production continues in regions of Europe, Asia, and North America, particularly where space is limited or rapid turnover is advantageous. In organic and sustainable farming systems, rabbits are valued for their natural fertilizer and for their role in integrated crop livestock systems. Experimental models in permaculture and regenerative agriculture have even revived traditional practices such as rotational warren grazing to enhance soil fertility and plant productivity. The story of rabbits in agriculture and work is thus one of quiet but profound influence. They are not celebrated for brute strength or labor-intensive power, yet their contributions, meat, manure, soil aeration, ecological balance, and household sustenance, demonstrate a nuanced form of agricultural utility. In many ways, rabbits exemplify the human capacity to identify and amplify subtle ecological services, transforming a small, fast-breeding herbivore into a multifaceted agricultural ally. Their legacy in this domain is both practical and instructive, revealing how even modest animals can shape the course of human subsistence, labor organization, and ecological understanding. From medieval warrens to modern permaculture systems, rabbits have proven themselves invaluable partners in the cultivation and management of the land. Their reproductive efficiency, dietary adaptability, and manageable size allowed humans to integrate them into labor systems that enhanced productivity, sustained families, and supported early commercial enterprises. The agricultural history of rabbits reminds us that impact is not always measured in sheer size or strength. Sometimes it is the quiet, persistent contributions of a small animal that leave the most enduring mark on human society.